There's no other commodity item that has taken that kind of hit, 6 or 7 times in the last couple of years. What do we do to stop the madness? I mean, there's no kill step with lettuce, right? You're not going to cook it.
Right.
So what are the other options? Do we just not eat lettuce anymore?
So maybe I'll tell you what I think the problem is and how come we're keep seeing it again and again and again, and then talk about what are all the alternatives. The reality is that if you focus on where romaine lettuce is grown, it's grown in the Central Valley in California, it's grown in the Salinas Valley area, it's grown in Yuma, depending upon the time of the year and based on the temperatures. They just kind of circle through those 3 areas. And if you've ever visited Fresno, if you've ever visited Salinas, if you've ever visited Yuma, one of the things that you notice fairly quickly is that this, ready to eat product is grown essentially alongside cattle. And cattle are the reservoir for E.Coli 0157. It is, without question, the fact that's grown nearby in proximity with water sources that are untreated or minimally treated, that we keep having the same problem over and over and over again. I remember one time having a case involving pre-made salads. So super convenient, you go into your grocery store, boom, it's all ready for you. It was an outbreak, 30, 40 people around the country. I got a court order to go on to the farm because we were able to pinpoint what farm it was, the growing operation. And I remember standing there with the lawyer. The field was fallow. It had been, long, told under. And I was standing on a road, dirt road, not more than a car and a half wide. And where the romaine had grown was on my left, and where on my right was a dairy farm. And you're like going, wow. Well, we've had this grow operation here forever, and we've never had a problem before. And so is that negligence or just straight up, stupidity? It's hard to sort of parse that out. The industry and the government, FDA, has done a lot since the spinach outbreak in 2006 that sickened 205 people, killed 5. And I was involved deeply in that. They've done a lot, but what they've done is they've done the easy stuff. They've done let's put up a barrier, let's, do this, let's do that, let's do more testing. The stuff that they haven't done and the stuff that's hard is, what are you going to do? Are you going to kick out the CAFO from Yuma? Or are you going to kick out the romaine lettuce people? We're now down to those very intractable fights over who came there first, who's got more political and financial power. These are the hard decisions that people need to make. Or do they make the decision that it's just part of the process and we're going to have 500 people with E. coli, 7 or 8 people dead, 200 people hospitalized and 50 with, long-term complications due to kidney failure. That's just the cost of us being able to consume romaine lettuce. I mean, those are the sort of decisions that need to be made. Right now, they're being made by default, that we're not dealing with those difficult issues of land use. So we're just allowing these outbreaks to clip along and, from one thing to another thing to another thing, but people are still ordering romaine lettuce.
So, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was going to be my question. Okay, so from a high level, it's very hard to say, okay, politically, one type of company is going to stay and one isn't. But there are other things that we can do to mitigate risk, right? Whether it's the flume water that's being used to wash the produce, to refrigeration, to, just the consumers handling at home.
Yep.
But people, it's almost as though they don't really give a fork, It's like they kind of just keep eating. And I scratch my head sometimes and I wonder, why is this one thing not really getting through to people? Do you think people are just, their laissez-faire attitude is just sort of like, well, there's nothing I can do about it, so I guess it's just Russian roulette?
Well, I think, it's sort of like, when we go to war, the way our military is now, where, what is it, less than 1% of families are impacted by wars now, primarily because people join and they're, it's very insular. It's very different than when you have, a war going on that everybody has to play ball, that there's a draft that people can't get out of. You have a different attitude towards it. I think in some respects, what we're seeing is that most people aren't impacted to a degree like, the recent outbreak. It's 30 people spread across, 20 states. The only people who really know about it are, the families that it happens to, me, some people at the FDA, CDC, and people like you who pay attention to food safety issues.
But, it's turned into a meme. Eating chocolate is now safer than eating romaine lettuce. I've been training for this my whole life,
Right.
But here's the thing that I still scratch my head about, because in my line of business and what I do, obviously I'm really, really aware of produce safety. There were so many, it seems to me that there were so many safeguards put into place after the E.Coli beef issue, but not so much with produce. Is it because it is so different and there is a true kill step for one versus not the other? Like, why do you think they did that with beef but not now with produce?
Well, I think the issue is that E. coli in beef, and yes, there were controls, and that used to be 90% of my law firm's business was E. coli cases linked to hamburger, and now it's zero or near zero. But the control, it's a very controlled environment, and there's a lot more interventions that are, and not to say that there aren't more interventions that consumers can do to clean products and stuff like that. I totally agree with that. But there's a lot more the industry and the beef industry could do to control their environment so the product that went out the door was less likely to be contaminated than it was 10 years earlier. And the benefit of having, a cook temp for 155 for 15 seconds to kill bacteria. Now when I'm seeing E. coli cases linked to hamburger, it's a lot of situations where restaurants who have stopped seeing these E. coli cases linked to hamburgers are now offering to, cook hamburgers to medium. And you're just like, oh my God,
Don't do it.
what are you thinking?
Yeah.
And so I think that, yes, the FDA and the leafy green industry have done an awful lot post 2006 to sort of fix this problem. I still think they are continuing to, try to do what they can to fix the problem. But I think we're down to the hard decisions and things like you know, I'm old enough. You're not. I'm old enough to remember when you would go to a grocery store and not be able to get things certain times of the year.
Yeah.
Now we can get anything we want any time of the year. And, look at this, these recent E. coli outbreaks linked to romaine lettuce. I think it's now up to, over 200 people sick. Almost all of them, I shouldn't say almost all of them, a full quarter of them are from Wisconsin. The farther, and that was also true in 2005 or 2006. A quarter or more than a quarter of the people who got sick in that outbreak were all from Wisconsin. And, seriously, Wisconsinites are not the ones eating a lot of romaine lettuce and leafy greens. It just happens to be by the time the product gets all the way from California to Wisconsin, it's had a couple, 3 or 4 days for that bacteria to, get an infectious dose higher. So there are going to be, I think you've got to ask yourself some real big questions like, should a CAFO be, within a stone's throw where you're growing romaine? Should you be mass producing romaine lettuce, then washing it, chopping it, putting it in a bag and shipping it to Wisconsin? Is that convenience? So is it worth the risk? And I think those are the we now are down to the tough decisions. And I think until we need to grapple with that, or we're just going to continue to have this problem again and again and again.
Yeah, so I interviewed Will Daniels. He was at Earthbound Farms, as you know.
Will and I didn't start out as friends, but we're now. I consider him a friend. I think he sort of considers me a friend.
Well, I mean, he like you and I, very passionate about this subject, and he shared, very openly a lot of information with me and talked to me about the Leafy Greens marketing agreement. Mm-hmm. And the Leafy Greens marketing agreement was something that was created again after that outbreak, the 2006 outbreak. But what startles me, and for everybody listening, it's an agreement that if you're growing leafy greens, that it's a voluntary program where you would test a certain amount of product and ensure before it comes out to the market that it has passed. Why is this voluntary? I have a hard time wrapping my head around why something like this, if there are problems over and over again, it wouldn't be mandatory. Farmers
in the U.S. are disproportionately powerful people. Each farm state has 2 senators, and so they are disproportionately powerful. We're fighting with China over trade, and it's should be costing our farmers hundreds of billions of dollars, but we're subsidizing them so they don't complain because they're so powerful. So the fact of the matter is that, people in positions of power, whether it's politicians, business leaders, people in the media, have come to the conclusion, I think, that these deaths and these illnesses are not necessarily acceptable, but they're tolerable. And, they leave it to guys like me to kind of clean up the mess. And I think that's an immoral position to take. But the balance is, if you want to solve this problem, there are ways to try to solve this problem. But it's not going to be easy. And it does require consumer and governmental action to protect consumers and to protect business from themselves. Are there certain things that you think that
the consumer should